Today we're going to talk about something incredibly important but also incredibly complex and difficult. We're counting down the top 10 poorest countries in the world. Now when we say poorest, we're using a specific economic metric, gross domestic product or GDP per capita. This is essentially the total value of all goods and services produced in a country in a year, divided by its population. It's a useful, if imperfect, way to get a snapshot of a nation's economic output relative to its size. It tells us something about the economic resources available on average to each person. But this isn't just a list of numbers, it's a list of places, of people, of stories. Understanding global poverty is about more than just statistics. It's about recognizing the intricate web of history, geography, politics, and environmental factors that shape the lives of billions. It's about acknowledging the profound inequalities that exist in our world and grasping the systemic challenges that keep nations trapped in cycles of poverty. Looking at these countries helps us understand the broader human condition and the shared responsibility we have to build a more equitable world. So, as we go through this list, I want you to think beyond the rankings. Think about the human beings living in these nations, their resilience, their hopes, and the immense structural barriers they face. This exploration isn't meant to be voyeuristic or to simply label these places as poor. Instead, it's an attempt to foster a deeper understanding and empathy, to see the world not just as it is, but as it could be. Let's begin. Kicking off our list at number 10 is the landlocked Central African nation of Chad. With a GDP per capita hovering around $700, Chad faces a formidable combination of challenges. Geographically, much of the country is dominated by the Sahara Desert, which creates immense difficulties for agriculture, the primary livelihood for about 80% of its population. This arid and semi-arid landscape is incredibly vulnerable to the effects of climate change, with increasing desertification and unpredictable rainfall patterns leading to chronic food insecurity for millions. Lake Chad, once a vast lifeline for the region, has shrunk dramatically, impacting fishermen, farmers, and herders alike. This environmental precarity is compounded by significant political instability. Chad has experienced a long history of authoritarian rule, rebellions, and cross-border conflicts that spill over from neighboring countries like Sudan, Libya, and Nigeria. These conflicts divert precious resources away from essential services like healthcare and education, and create a constant state of uncertainty that deters foreign investment. The nation does have significant oil reserves, but the revenue from this resource has often been mismanaged or used to fund military expenditures, rather than for broad-based development, leaving the majority of Chadians still living in extreme poverty. At number 9, we travel to the world's fourth largest island, Madagascar. Its GDP per capita is strikingly low, especially when you consider its incredible biodiversity and unique natural resources, which theoretically offer huge potential for tourism and research. However, the country's economy is fragile and largely dependent on agriculture, particularly the production of vanilla, cloves, and coffee. This reliance on a few key exports makes the economy extremely vulnerable to global price fluctuations and, more critically, to environmental shocks. Madagascar is one of the countries most affected by climate change, facing a devastating combination of droughts in the south and powerful cyclones in the east. These environmental challenges are exacerbated by widespread deforestation, as much of the population relies on slash-and-burn agriculture and charcoal production for their survival. This loss of forest cover not only destroys unique habitats but also leads to severe soil erosion, which further undermines agricultural productivity. Political instability, including several coups and periods of contested leadership over the past few decades, has repeatedly disrupted economic growth, scared off investors, and hampered the development of crucial infrastructure like roads, schools, and hospitals, leaving much of the population isolated and without access to basic services. Our 8th country is Liberia, a nation on the West African coast with a unique history, founded by freed American slaves. Its recent past, however, has been defined by two devastating back-to-back civil wars that raged from 1989 to 2003. These conflicts destroyed nearly all of the country's infrastructure. Roads, power grids, hospitals, and schools were left in ruins. The human cost was even greater, with hundreds of thousands killed and a whole generation traumatized and displaced. The economy, which had once been relatively strong based on iron ore and rubber exports, completely collapsed. In the 2 decades since the wars ended, Liberia has been on a long and arduous path of rebuilding. There has been progress. Peace has largely held, and democratic institutions have been slowly re-established. However, the scars of war run deep. The lack of infrastructure continues to be a massive impediment to economic development, making it difficult to transport goods, attract investment, or provide services to rural populations. The 2014 Ebola outbreak was a further catastrophic setback, overwhelming the fragile healthcare system and once again halting economic activity. Liberia's struggle is a powerful reminder of how long and difficult the road to recovery is after profound conflict. We return to the Sahel region for our seventh country, Niger. Like its neighbor Chad, Niger is a vast, landlocked nation, with over 80% of its landmass covered by the Sahara Desert. This stark geographical reality is the central challenge of life in Niger. The country has one of the fastest-growing populations in the world, but its agricultural capacity is extremely limited and under constant threat from desertification, soil degradation, and increasingly erratic rainfall due to climate change. This creates a state of chronic food insecurity where slight variations in the annual harvest can tip millions into a state of hunger. These environmental and demographic pressures are intensified by regional instability. Niger is situated in a volatile neighborhood, bordered by countries facing insurgencies and conflicts, such as Nigeria, Mali, and Burkina Faso. The presence of extremist groups in the region drains government resources towards security and defense, leaving little for investment in education, healthcare, and economic diversification. While Niger is a major producer of uranium, the benefits of this resource have not translated into widespread prosperity for its people, who remain among the poorest and least educated in the world, trapped in a cycle of environmental vulnerability and insecurity. At number 6 is Mozambique, a country on the southeast coast of Africa that presents something of a paradox. In recent years, Mozambique has been one of Africa's fastest-growing economies, primarily due to the discovery of massive natural gas reserves and significant coal deposits. On paper, this should be a story of rapid development and poverty reduction. However, the reality for the majority of Mozambicans is far different. The benefits of this resource boom have been slow to trickle down, and the country is still grappling with the deep-rooted legacies of a brutal 16-year civil war that ended in 1992. Despite the headline growth figures, Mozambique faces immense challenges. It remains one of the most unequal countries in the world, with a vast gap between a small, wealthy elite and the rural majority who still rely on subsistence agriculture. The country is also extremely vulnerable to climate change, frequently hit by devastating cyclones and floods that wipe out infrastructure and harvests, as seen with Cyclone Idai in 2019. Furthermore, an ongoing insurgency in the gas-rich northern province of Cabo Delgado has displaced hundreds of thousands of people, created a humanitarian crisis, and stalled major energy projects, highlighting the fragile link between natural resources, conflict, and development. Number 5 is the Democratic Republic of the Congo, or DRC, a country that starkly embodies the concept of the resource curse. The DRC is, by some estimates, the single wealthiest country on Earth in terms of untapped natural resources. It holds vast reserves of cobalt, essential for batteries in our phones and electric cars, as well as diamonds, gold, copper, and coltan. This immense mineral wealth, valued in the tens of trillions of dollars, stands in shocking contrast to the extreme poverty experienced by its people. With a GDP per capita of around $550, the DRC is one of the poorest nations in the world. So what explains this tragic paradox? A history scarred by brutal colonial exploitation, decades of corrupt dictatorship, and, since the 1990s, a series of devastating wars and ongoing conflicts, particularly in the eastern part of the country. These conflicts are often fueled by the scramble to control and illegally exploit the DRC's mineral wealth. The lack of a strong, stable government and pervasive corruption means that state revenues from mining often disappear, rather than being invested in roads, schools, or hospitals. The very resources that should be funding the DRC's development have instead become a driver of instability and immense human suffering. The Central African Republic, or CAR, at number 4, is a nation that has been in a near-constant state of crisis for decades. Landlocked and plagued by instability since its independence, the country has rarely experienced true peace. Its recent history has been defined by a series of coups and a brutal civil war that erupted in 2012, largely fought along sectarian lines between different armed groups. This conflict has shattered the country's social fabric and destroyed what little infrastructure it had. The government's control barely extends beyond the capital city, Bangui, leaving most of the country as a lawless territory controlled by various militias. This perpetual conflict has made any meaningful economic activity virtually impossible. Farmers are unable to safely tend their fields, traders cannot move goods, and potential investors are completely deterred. The CAR is rich in diamonds, gold, and timber, but like in the DRC, these resources are largely exploited by armed groups to fund their operations, perpetuating the cycle of violence. For the average citizen, life is a daily struggle for survival. Access to basic services like clean water, healthcare, and education is almost non-existent outside the capital, and the country has some of the worst human development indicators in the world. Coming in at number 3 is Malawi, a landlocked country in southeastern Africa often called the warm heart of Africa for the friendliness of its people. Despite this, Malawi faces profound economic hardship. Its economy is overwhelmingly dependent on agriculture, which accounts for about a third of its GDP and employs over 80% of its workforce. The primary cash crop is tobacco, which alone makes up a significant portion of the country's export earnings. This heavy reliance on a single commodity makes the Malawian economy extremely vulnerable to fluctuations in global tobacco demand and prices. Furthermore, Malawian agriculture is predominantly rain-fed and small-scale, making it highly susceptible to weather-related shocks like droughts and floods, which are becoming more frequent and severe due to climate change. The country also struggles with rapid population growth, which puts immense pressure on land and public services. While Malawi has been politically stable compared to many of its neighbors, it struggles with systemic issues like corruption and a lack of economic diversification. This combination of factors traps a large portion of its population in a cycle of subsistence living and poverty. Our runner-up, the second poorest country in the world, is South Sudan. As the world's newest nation, gaining independence from Sudan in 2011, there was immense hope for a peaceful and prosperous future. The country sits on some of the largest oil reserves in sub-Saharan Africa, which were supposed to bankroll its development. Tragically, these hopes were shattered just 2 years after independence when a political disagreement spiraled into a catastrophic civil war, devastating impact on the economy and the people. It killed an estimated 400,000 people and displaced millions, creating one of the worst refugee crises of the 21st century. It also crippled the country's oil production, which is virtually its only source of revenue. With infrastructure destroyed, markets disrupted, and millions driven from their farms, the nation has been plunged into a perpetual humanitarian crisis, with widespread famine and a complete collapse of public services. Even with a fragile peace agreement in place, the path to recovery for South Sudan is incredibly challenging, hindered by deep-seated mistrust, localized violence, and a shattered economy. And at number 1 on our list of the poorest countries in the world is Burundi. This small, densely populated, landlocked nation in the Great Rift Valley of Africa has a GDP per capita of less than $300. Burundi's economy is almost entirely reliant on subsistence agriculture, with coffee and tea being the main cash crops. This makes the country highly vulnerable to climate shocks and fluctuations in global commodity prices. But the roots of Burundi's extreme poverty are deeply entwined with its tumultuous political history. Since its independence, Burundi has been scarred by ethnic tensions and cycles of political violence, including a brutal civil war that lasted from 1993 to 2005. This instability has decimated the economy, destroyed infrastructure, and fostered a climate of fear that has stifled investment and development. A political crisis in 2015 further isolated the country and led to a suspension of foreign aid, which had been a crucial lifeline. For the people of Burundi, the consequences are dire. Chronic malnutrition is rampant, access to education and healthcare is severely limited, and opportunities for economic advancement are almost non-existent, making it the most economically challenged nation on the planet. So there you have it, a look at the 10 countries with the lowest GDP per capita in the world. But as I hope we've made clear, this is about so much more than a list. Each country has a unique and complex story, a tangled web of history, conflict, geography, and governance that has led to its current situation. Seeing these challenges isn't about pity, it's about understanding. It's about recognizing that the wealth and stability many of us take for granted are not universal, and that the accident of our birth plays a profound role in the opportunities we have. But understanding is only the first step. The problems of global poverty are enormous, but they are not insurmountable. They are human-made problems, and they have human-made solutions. If this video has sparked something in you, I encourage you to learn more. Read about the work of international development organizations, study the impact of fair trade, and understand the role that good governance and peace-building play in creating prosperity. Support organizations that are on the ground, doing the hard work of building schools, providing clean water, and empowering communities. Change is possible, but it requires awareness, empathy, and collective action. Thank you so much for watching and for engaging with this difficult but vital topic. We believe that education is the most powerful tool we have to change the world. If you found this video informative and want to keep exploring complex global issues with us, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps us continue to make content like this.